The film Brotherhood really used sound, camera movement, and editing to its advantage and managed to portray the emotions felt by the family in the film without actually blatantly stating them, which I think points to a really skilled storyteller. To start off, I think the sound played a massive role in depicting the family tension. Throughout the whole film, the most prominent sound that exists is that of the wind and its very subtle eerie hum, which mimics the sound of music. This is present, for example, in the scene where the father encounters his son for the first time in a year. I think the use of the sound of the wind is very effective because it is generally associated with cold nights, and therefore it naturally embeds an unsettling and cold feeling in the viewers, matching that of the family in the film. The wind was not the only sound of nature included in the film to depict the tense environment. The rough sound of the waves crashing definitely added to the intensity and seemed to hint at a coming problem, which was actually the case. It felt like a form of foreshadowing. Especially given the shot where the boy was situated in the middle and was out of focus whilst the sea was in focus. It seemed to deliver a message of the upcoming trouble he is about to find himself in, which I think was a brilliant way of showing and not telling. Another way through which sound was used to build up the tension was in the scene where the whole family was eating dinner for the first time together. The sound of the chewing was elevated, and I think this actually emphasized the tense silence between them. It makes the viewer realize how very quiet the environment is to the point where the chewing is very clearly heard. This really builds up the tense and uncomfortable feeling presented in the film between the family. As for the camera, there were various close-up shots which I think added to the tension in two ways. The first way is that the facial expression of the characters in the shot were very blatant and evident due to the proximity, which allows the viewer to better understand the emotions felt and in result also feel it. And the other way is since there are consistent close-up shots where the subjects are taking up most of the frame, it stimulates a feeling of claustrophobia, which definitely makes the viewer feel uneasy, mirroring the family in the film. However, the close-ups are not the only aspect of camera work that exists to show the family tension. Another aspect is the shallow depth of field constantly used throughout. This means that the subject in the frame is in focus, whilst the background is completely out of focus. This really directs the attention solely on the subject and therefore emphasizes their expressions and emotions more dramatically, which surely stresses on the tension. It also adds to the feeling of claustrophobia because the frame does not seem open and inclusive, but rather its focus is restricted to only this one subject. As for the colors and tones used in the film, I think they were intentionally chosen to represent this feeling of distrust, glumness, and strain. The tones were constantly very dull and mainly leaned more towards the cool undertones, rather than warm ones. This, accompanied with the sound of the wind, really does ensure that the viewers are felt feeling how cold and distant the family are. Furthermore, the camera movement also played a role in depicting certain emotions. For example, during the scene where the dad regretted calling the police on his son and was running to go warn him before they reach him, the camera was handheld. This means that the person holding the camera was also running, giving this very hectic effect that showed how urgent and tense the father was feeling. Lastly, a key element in the editing that really highlighted the distance between the family was how the characters were not placed in the same frame. For example, in the scene where both the husband and the wife were discussing their son's arrival, it was clear that they were situated in front of each other, but never does the camera include them both in the same frame. On the contrary, it constantly alternates between them throughout the whole conversation, showing each individually. This is a sign of how far apart they are, not just physically, but emotionally. There is no sense of inclusion or closeness represented whatsoever through this editing technique. Overall, I think it is safe to say that the film really focused on showing more than telling. There was never really a sentence that stated how tense the relationship between the family members is or how distant they are. The filmmakers relied heavily on the camera shots, movements, the sounds, the editing, and the tones and colors in order to deliver this tense emotion present between the different characters. And as a viewer, I can confirm that I easily felt the tension due to all the different visual and auditory factors combined together to create this Oscar-nominated short film.